Good evening and welcome. I am Amarachi Ubani. Tonight, state governors offer to support federal government's efforts to reverse economic recession. President Buhari seeks National Assembly's approval for $29.9 billion external borrowing. Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation denies plans to increase pump price of petrol. United Nations Population Fund advocates investments in girl-child education to address poverty and unemployment in Nigeria. Militant Islamist group Al-Shabaab targets Kenyan theatre group, kills at least 12 people in the northeastern town of Mandara.
On Business News tonight, the House of Representatives exposes multi-billion naira fraud between government MDAs and insurance companies.
And on sports news tonight, Brazil's flamboyant 1970 World Cup winning captain Carlos Alberto dies at his home in Rio de Janeiro after suffering a heart attack.
And from Abuja, I am Ibrahim Adra. Controversy trails killing of footballer Joseph Izu in Rivers State. Family members accuse soldiers of soccer stars' extrajudicial murder.
We begin tonight with the continued search for the right strategy to get Nigeria out of economic recession. And Nigerian governors are pitching agriculture as a potential solution, and they have pledged to work with the federal government on the challenge. This is part of the outcome of a meeting of the National Economic Council at the Presidential Villa in Abuja, with the Vice President, Professor Yemi Oshibajo, presiding. Our State House correspondent, Chukwuma Onekwusi, reports.
The National Economic Council, chaired by the Vice President, is charged with the responsibility of guarding the President's economic policies. They are meeting when Nigeria is said to be undergoing very serious economic recession. Economic experts say they have the responsibility to pull Nigeria out of it. And what are they doing?
We have agreed at NEC that state governors would partner with the federal government in this regard, and to ensure productivity and high yield in the agricultural sector. And we have cautioned seriously that the Standard Organization of Nigeria, NAFDAC, and all those agencies that deals with quality of goods should do the utmost best to ensure that rubbish is not sent to this country. Again, we discussed about increasing the generation of revenue for the Ministry of Mines and solid minerals and steel. And we agreed that proper consultant should be engaged in this regard.
The deplorable state of electricity supply in Nigeria is still a source of concern to many. The Edo State Governor Adams Oshiomhole, who is making his last outing as a member of the council, says government has to diversify to give Nigerians steady power supply. He also expatiated on what the federal government is doing in the housing sector.
The government is working on diversifying various sources of power supply, including hydro, solar, wind, and of course gas. I think from the briefing of the Honorable Minister, the interruptions in gas supply is part of the problem. We also had a conversation around the blueprint that the Ministry of Housing has worked on to deliver a number of housing units across the country. And I think the interesting thing in the brief is the fact that a lot of the building materials that will be used will be made in Nigeria.
Council extols the governor of Edo State, Adams Oshiomhole, for what they called a job well done.
We all know his reputation has preceded, especially when it comes to integrity, honesty, and commitment to his people in Edo State. And like I said, we are going to miss him, and we hope God Almighty Allah will protect him, give him good health and long life.
The National Economic Council members wish the outgoing governor of Edo State well in his future endeavors. Chukwuma Onekwusi, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the President, Muhammadu Buhari, is seeking the approval of the National Assembly for external borrowing of $29.9 billion. This sum is to ensure the prompt implementation of projects. In a letter addressed to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, President Buhari says the projects cut across agriculture, health, education and water supply.
Considering the huge infrastructure deficit currently being experienced in the country and the enormous financial resources required to fill the gap in the face of dwindling resources and the inability of our annual budgetary provisions to bridge the infrastructure deficit, it has become necessary to resort to prudent external borrowing to bridge the financial gap, which will largely be applied to key infrastructure projects, namely power, railway, and roads projects, among others. The total cost of the projects and programs under the borrowing rolling plan is $29.960 billion, made up of proposed projects and programs loan of $11.274 billion, special national infrastructure project $10.686 billion, Euro bonds of $4.5 billion, and federal government budget support of $3.5 billion.
The President has written to the National Assembly requesting the transfer of funds appropriated for special intervention. These funds are expected to be spent on recurrent and capital items. In the letter read on the floors of the Senate and House of Representatives, President Muhammadu Buhari explained that the request is necessary due to shortfalls in recurrent and capital expenditure. He is seeking a total of 180 billion naira to cover the deficit.
Considering the fact that budgeted revenues are running behind targets, largely due to the renewed violence in the Niger Delta, and there are no supplementary revenue sources, the most viable option for now is the development of appropriated funds from heads or sub-heads that may not be fully utilized before the end of this fiscal year. In the course of implementing the 2016 Appropriation Act, several MDAs have presented issues pertaining to salary shortfalls, the settlement of part of which has led to depletion of the Public Service Wage Adjustment, PSWA. Only 20 billion already fully released was provided in the 2016 budget for the Niger Delta Amnesty Program. Consequently, the allowances to ex-militants have only been paid up to May 2016. This is creating a lot of restiveness and compounding security challenges in the Niger Delta. Due to the devaluation of the Naira, the budgetary provisions for the foreign missions are no longer sufficient to cover all their costs. The provision for presidential initiatives for Northeast 12 billion has a balance of less than 1.5 billion, and there continues to be emerging challenges with internally displaced persons in the zone.
Joining me now to discuss the outcome of today's National Economic Council meeting and the related issues on ways to get Nigeria out of recession is development economist Dr. Israel Adeleye. Thank you for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you very much.
Let's begin with the council meeting. Today, the governors were proposing agriculture as helping Nigeria to get out of the recession. What do you make of their thoughts?
Well, it's good to diversify into agriculture because Nigeria has relied on revenue from oil for quite a long time. But in times of recession, looking towards agriculture as taking us out may not be in the immediate period. In fact, it will take a longer gestation. Looking at, it's been neglected for a long time. And for us now to look at agriculture as the savior, taking us out of the woods, may not be in the right direction for now. We should pursue it quite okay because it will provide employment. It will lift us out of the negative employment rate that we have. It will also enable us to go into export. But we are looking at a gestation of 2, 3, 4 years because a lot of things have been neglected. Do we have those who have really been trained to go into agriculture? Our graduates really accustomed to go back into this aspect or into this sector? Are we really sure that, yes, we have the ability to process our products as and when manufactured? Are we doing enough research to get the best out of agriculture? These are some of the key questions. It is good to really have this policy to say, well, let's move into agriculture. But in the interim, will it take us out of the woods? My answer is no.
Most of the economists that we've spoken to have proposed more spending by government. So perhaps if the government spends more through agriculture, don't you think that would help?
How will the government spend more through agriculture?
Well, maybe providing of infrastructure,
Precisely.
Yeah, paying more staff and so on.
I agree with you that, yes, government has to spend more in terms of investing in infrastructure. That is, if, for instance, now the real equipments that will be used are available either for lease or either to support the young farmers that will come, we must move from subsistence farming into real mechanized farming. If we're really coming into agriculture per se, Malaysia came here and saw our palm oil, took it off from us, and today we are importing palm oil. It's quite sad. So if government will spend massively in infrastructure, it will take us out of it. And that's why the loan being proposed is in the right direction. My worry is, will it be judiciously spent, or it's a case of bringing in $100 and 50% of it will still go through corruption again? If it will be judiciously spent, it will kickstart funds and may gradually start taking us out of recession, but it must be judiciously spent.
The president is asking for approval to borrow $29 or over $29 billion at this time. Your thoughts on that, first of all?
Well, we need massive inflow of foreign exchange. You will observe that the reserve is dwindling because the demand for foreign exchange locally is quite high, and we are unable to generate sufficient foreign exchange from our own oil because of various things that is happening in the market, the major data that is really militating against being able to meet our production quota. So it is in the right direction that, yes, we are trying to get inflow of foreign exchange, but it is key that when these funds flows in, that it is used judiciously. 100% must be used, yes.
But wouldn't that throw us further into debt?
We need debt to come out of debt. No, it's like, for instance, you are building a house and you are stuck at the lintel level, and you need funds to complete it to be able to rent it out. So you need further loan to assist you to complete it, be able to earn revenue, and be able to come out of your debt. If further loans is not available, Nigeria will remain in recession for such a longer period, definitely.
Well, we're not looking forward to remaining in this recession for a longer period. So what would be the shortest cut to getting out of this?
A lot of things has to come in. The first one for me would be there should be incentives to promote businesses locally. The tax is too many that is really killing businesses in this country. You pay withholding tax and you are unable to recoup it, and for you to get it back from the inland revenue is a lot of hassles. And while your fund is still tied down there and you have to pay income tax, you have to go through a lot of tax audit before that can really come out. Secondly, we need to reduce the cash reserve ratio that banks are holding so that they can be able to lend into the real sector, because the real sector are growing. Banks too are not lending to the real sector. They prefer short-term lending that can give them quick returns. We need to assist the real sector to be able to raise the unemployment rate. The third thing is we need indeed to address the issue of government addressing the recession that we are in through employment.
Dr. Israel Adeleye, it's been a pleasure speaking with you on the News at 10. Thanks for coming. In part two, after the break, Niger Delta Avenger strikes again, blows up Chevron crude export pipeline in Escravos, and MPCLA's fears a petrol price hike. All this coming up shortly. Do join us again.